the numbers of birds that are moving through at night, that North American bird populations had dropped by about 3 billion birds, or 30% since 1970. And the birds that suffered the greatest losses were the birds we most want to hear, the warblers, finches, blackbirds, and also sparrows. And they also found that not only was it birds that were rare or declining, but it was more common birds, birds like the Baltimore orioles. So that really was kind of a wake-up call. And then just in March of this year, another study came out and confirmed that the losses are continuing. So there's 112 bird species in North America that have lost more than 50% of their population in 50 years. So it's kind of a code red time for birds. And that's why I'm here. Now I know in this crowd, how many of you have bird feeders or consider yourself a bird watcher? So a pretty good percentage. So I guess what brings you joy about birds? Anybody willing to share that?
Hummingbird.
Hummingbirds, okay. Just the sight of them. Well, birds, we know that birds bring a lot of joy to us. They also bring, studies are starting to show that they're important for our mental health. There's a study in 2022 in the United Kingdom that found that just seeing or hearing bird song led to increased feelings of well-being, and that well-being lasted for up to 8 hours. So we all know that in these days when there's a lot of young people particularly that are suffering depression, it's just free medicine for all of us. So what are other reasons why birds are important? Why should we care about this decline?
Eat insects.
Eat insects, right. So particularly forest and ag insects. So they help those industries. They also really anchor. Wisconsin has a $2.6 billion wildlife watching industry, and birding really is the heart of that. Wisconsin actually has the ties for second with the highest proportion of people that are bird watchers. So about, these are actually 2011 figures when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service last looked at that on a state-by-state basis. So about 33% of our adult population identifies as bird watchers. And the number one state was Vermont, and we tied with West Virginia. So obviously, bird watching is a big business for our local communities. And birds are important for maintaining healthy ecosystems. They disperse seeds. They also pollinate. The hummingbird pollinates, a very effective pollinator, and Baltimore orioles are actually also pollinate. So there's a lot of great reasons to kind of care and to worry about our birds. Concern over those two studies really led to the formation of SOS Save Our Songbirds. And after I retired in 2021, the Natural Resources Foundation gave me a small contract to do a little bit of communications around one particular bird, the Connecticut warbler. And I thought I had one of those in here, but I don't. And turns out it's a bird that really was suffering a steep decline. And in fact, in 2022, DNR set out some crack surveyors, and they only found one breeding pair in the prime nesting area. So it's really suffering. When I talked to the DNR folks, they said, well, this bird may not, be around. A lot of people aren't familiar with it, so it's probably not a good one to focus your communication efforts on. We, Natural Resources Foundation, agreed to broaden it, and this was born SOS Save Our Songbirds, which is, again, trying to raise awareness of the declines in population, but more importantly, give people 3 easy things that they can do at home to help save songbirds, because they're an important part of our life and certainly an important part of our ecosystem. So today we're going to take a little bit of time just to go through these 3 things. I know that many of you in the room probably already do some, or maybe you do all of them, which is awesome. So, but the first thing that we encourage people to do is to add some plants that are good for birds. And why do we do that? Well, because native plants, so plants that evolve in an area with the soils and the climate and the insects, they produce far more food for our birds than non-native plants, ornamental plants that have been introduced. So I've got some, or I should say why that is so important is because the food that they produce is primarily going to be caterpillars. Anybody know what this bird is? Chickadee, yay! So chickadee, in the summer, when they are feeding their nestlings, they have to bring back 350 to 570 caterpillars every day for 60, yes, Mary's back there going, what? And as a parent, you can imagine, the parents take turn feeding, but that's bringing back a caterpillar once every 3 minutes, pretty much from about 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. So that's just, that's a lot. And so this tiny little bird, which weighs half an ounce, about as much as 2 quarters, you want to be able to have this bird be able to find those caterpillars close by. Because can you imagine if you're having to carry 570 caterpillars a day, how much energy that would burn? So native plants, and let me pull this over here. Do we have any forestry folks in the room?
Kinds of them.
All kinds of them. All right. So can anybody identify this? Oak. It's an oak. Yep. It's a white oak. Yes. So oaks are like the champion producers of caterpillars for butterflies and moths. Oaks have been documented to support more than 500 different kinds of caterpillars. So this is like a great plant to have in your yard for birds. All right, or your woods. And anybody, this is kind of starting to fade a little bit, but anybody recognize the leaves? Ginkgo. So this is an introduced plant. It supports only about 5 species of butterfly and caterpillar. So it really is a cool plant, but it leaves a bit of a food desert for birds. So native plants, while trees and shrubs are going to be the native plants that provide the biggest bang for the buck, the most caterpillars and food for birds, flowers, native wildflowers, which are sometimes easier to fit into our yard, they're also great sources of both insects and then seeds. So this little orange one is, anybody know what that orange flower? Butterfly weed. Yep. Yes, and in fact, I do have some free butterfly milkweed to take home if you want. And that one is great both because the nectar and the pollen attract insects, and then the birds in turn eat the insects, and then in the fall, the seeds are eaten by birds. So it's a great thing. We have, and I'll make sure to come up and pick a copy of this up. It's a list of all the best native trees, shrubs, and wildflowers for birds, and it's got great examples. So this is a resource every spring. I take a look at it and see what I can add to the yard just to keep on, giving more food for birds and shelter and stuff like that. So this is a book that was developed by Mariette Nowak, who was the executive director at the Weir Nature Center in the Milwaukee area. So she's both a native plant expert and then also a bird expert. And so she's combined her knowledge. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. This is the problem when you don't use your PowerPoint. You're subject to your fading memory. So I've tried to think of whether there's anything about plants other than 96% of terrestrial birds rely on insects to feed their young. So for the continuation, the new generations of birds, we absolutely need to be adding some plants that will provide caterpillars and other insects, because that's what baby birds need to survive. I'll mention this. Anybody remember these? Pussy willows. Pussy willows are actually a great plant to add because these little catkins attract insects. And so some of the birds that are coming back most earliest in the spring are able to eat the insects. And so that's a really good one. They're actually a top plant for hummingbird as well. So yeah, believe it or not. And in fact, if you want, this book just came out. This is my little plug. Mariette, the woman who developed that brochure I just mentioned, she just came out with a book on the 50 best plants for native landscaping, and she breaks it down into the 10 best plants for hummingbirds, for attracting indigo buntings, for attracting goldfinches. So another, if you really want to dig in and target those species, that's a good book, and I can give you some information. So moving on to the second step is about windows. Let me see a show of hands. Who has ever had a bird run into their window? Looking at you, Jim Amrine, do you remember what bird it was? Ooh, he says which one? Okay, so Jim said he had the wrong distance. So actually what the experts are recommending is to have your bird feeder within 3 feet of your window or beyond about 32 feet. So have you corrected it, Jim? Okay. Well, maybe that's what you could do. But so what happens with birds are they see windows these days with the various energy ratings are very reflective. And so a bird might see trees or other plants, shrubs reflected in the window and think that that's habitat they can fly to. And so, of course, they're going full speed and then boom. Or the other thing that's a big problem is what they call the fly-through effect. And that's when you might have a sliding glass door opposite your big, beautiful picture window, and the bird can see, again, trees or plants on the other side. So they think they can get to that habitat. So a study came out in 2024 and concluded that windows in the United States kill up to 3.5 billion birds a year. About half of that happens at homes, and then a little bit more than the other half happens at buildings that are 4 to 11 stories. Everybody thinks that skyscrapers are a problem, and they are, in the sense that lots of birds can die in a single event, but there's so far fewer skyscrapers that homes and smaller buildings are a bit of a problem. The good news is there's lots of things that we can do to fix a problem window. And most people will only have maybe one problem window. Is it, Jim, was it the same window or? Okay. So usually you can take care of the problem by fixing one window or sliding door. So I'm going to give you just a couple of examples of things. So, and I think Barb was mentioning this, double hung windows. I've got an old house and screens. There's a group called the American Bird Conservancy, and they do lots of testing of products. And screens are honestly, screens that go on the outside are about the most effective thing that can be done. And so, whether if you've got them, put them up, or if you're going to be replacing your old windows, ask them if you can get some of the screens to go with that. Second, let's see, another thing would be for all you grandmas who are looking for a creative project to do with your grandkids, you can use something like tempera paint, which is washable paint, or an oil-based marker. I made this with a Sharpie, and put a pattern on it on the outside. That's another one that works well. And then a gentleman in Pennsylvania invented something called an Ethiopian bird saver. And what it is it's parachute cord that is essentially tied in lengths that run the length of the window, and then it's fastened to the outside of the frame, and it sways a little bit in the wind. So it signals to the birds, that there's a solid here. And this gentleman, you can send him the dimensions to your window, and he'll make one for you. He'll sell it to you. Or he also has do-it-yourself instructions on his website, and there's lots of videos. So it is something that you can make at home if you choose. And then the last one I'd highlight would be there's a lot of different products that are kind of 2D solutions that you could put on the outside of your glass. This is a product called Feather Friendly. It's out of Canada. And I helped Mary Farmelo put some up on her house. How's it going, Mary?
Good.
Good. We have on our website a link to the Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance, which has a list of contractors that have experience putting those up. And in fact, Dan Fields. I was kind of hoping Dan would be here today to offer a testimonial. Dan put up the same product, but a little bit bigger. Allows you to put up 6 rows of dots at the same time. And Dan put that up on his windows. He's got extensive feeders, and it's worked very well. And he gave me extra, so I was able to give it to the Madison Zoo to put up on some of their problem windows. So, so that's the second thing that can really help birds, because you know, most homes you're not going to have a lot of birds hit, but it all adds up. You know, and 3.5 billion birds a year, that takes a toll. So moving around to the third step, let me ask, raise your hand if you are a coffee drinker. All right, just about 100%. Well, as I had mentioned earlier, habitat loss is one of the biggest problems for birds. And not just habitat loss here in the United States, but also in Central and South America, where many of our songbirds spend their winters. And there's a variety of reasons that that's going on, but one of the reasons actually has to do with coffee, the coffee that we drink. The Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center was noticing, decreases in bird populations in those areas, and they concluded that about 75% of the coffee that we drink is grown in ways that can hurt bird habitat. So what happened is about 50 years ago, there was a rust, a coffee fungus, that killed the coffee variety that was being used. And so everybody switched to a variety that grows better in the sun. And so what that triggered was a bunch of people cutting down the forest so that they could grow this coffee variety. So it removed the trees that the birds need for habitat, and then because there were no longer as many birds, the insects started to really take a toll. So then lots of pesticides were used. So the Smithsonian, about 25 years ago, developed a certification program for farms that were willing to go to manage up to this very high level to protect bird habitat. So the farms that get certified through the Smithsonian, they have to have at least 60% of native tree species, and they also have to have mature trees, so the trees have to be at least 40 feet high, and they have to use 100% organic farming methods, and they cannot have a recent history of deforestation. So it's like just a great coffee where the farmers get a little higher price because they're meeting these high standards. So this program's now about 25 years old, and there are now 100 different coffee roasters in the United States that sell coffee from these farms. And right now, most of that coffee is going to be easiest to purchase online, either with a subscription or whatever. So this is an example of a national brand. It's called Birds and Beans. And I've got free samples up here. I'd love to have you take mostly dark roast samples, but also some medium roast samples. And then I've got decaf that I over-ordered, so please take a sample and serve it up with your cherry pie or whatever you've got planned for the holiday. But this is one of the national brands. I get a subscription to this. I have that coffee delivered to my door. Starting last year, we now have 2 brands in Wisconsin. This is Barnwood, which is out of Two Rivers, Manitowoc area, a young woman who offers these bird-friendly brews. So it's delicious coffee. Again, order it online. I've got cards for both of those companies if you're interested. There's also a bird-friendly or a roaster in Superior called Arco that now has a couple of bird-friendly roasts. So those are kind of the 2 things. And if you don't really want to mess with buying coffee online, I get that. The Smithsonian says the next best thing is to buy organic coffee, and that's very widely available, at coffee stores and grocery stores and things like that. So, those are the 3 steps. Add some native plants that are good for birds, because again, native plants will feed the insects, and the insects will feed the birds. if you've got a problem window, to try to do something, because that will have, no pun intended, an immediate impact. Because you take away that window, problem window, and you're not going to have those birds every year. And then, if you can, try to drink some of this bird-friendly coffee. And again, I encourage you to take a sample home and brew up a cup. So those are the 3 steps that we've encouraged. In the 2 years, we've actually launched in 2023, and we have gotten some small grants from the Natural Resources Foundation, and the Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance is our fiscal sponsor, which means any grant money or donations go to Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance. They manage the money on behalf of SOS. We seek reimbursement. And since we started in 2023, we've given presentations or done tabling and contacted about 20,000 people. And we've given away almost 3,000 plants. We just had a native plant sale fundraiser that sold $21,000 worth of plants. So we feel really good about helping be part of the solution and empowering people to take steps at home. I think we've also provided about 1,500 of the window treatment kits. So, as I mentioned, I'm sure many of you are already doing some of these steps. If you're not, but maybe make this summer the year to try it. And I also just want to encourage and invite anybody who is interested in volunteering to consider working with SOS Save Our Songbirds, whether you're interested in tabling, coming to a festival and talking to people about these 3 steps, or if you are interested in giving a presentation. I do a lot of presentation. When I worked at DNR for 25 years, I was always behind the scenes, didn't necessarily like to present, and now I have to kind of push myself to get outside of my comfort zone to make a presentation. But I feel like it's such a critical, we're kind of running out of time, and the whole idea of SOS Save Our Songbirds is to make it, give people some simple steps, make the materials engaging and colorful, and also help empower people by starting out with some supplies. So with that, together we're saving songbirds 1 yard, 1 window, and 1 cup of coffee at a time.